Hi, my name is Julia Schank, and this is my case study analysis project for Ethics in Counseling and Addiction Recovery Sciences. All right, so this is a really fascinating case that happened in 2020 back in Georgia. So the backstory is Crystal Johnson, she's to your left. She was the client. She started going to therapy for addiction, specifically for substance abuse. She went to MAR for recovery, where she met her therapist, Tiffany Leggett. And she said they hit it off right away and that she made her feel very special. So Tiffany Leggett, she's a state licensed therapist in Georgia and a master social worker. She worked at MAR at the time and she helped Crystal become sober. Things started to take a disturbing turn. They started to have inappropriate contact with one another. She started to ask Leggett, the therapist, started asking Johnson to do things outside of therapy, such as bike rides, dinner at the therapist's home, trips out of state, running races, and it even resulted in her insisting on them sleep in the same bed together when they were in the hotel rooms. And it also led to very inappropriate correspondence. She would send questionable pictures, use a lot of profanity in her text messages to her, and they would FaceTime outside of therapy that had nothing to do with therapy. So needless to say, their relationship was very inappropriate and very unethical. Crystal said she had me do an assignment where I had to write out everyone I had ever had a crush on. Then she asked me specifically, basically why her name was on the list, and I was mortified. I don't know about you, but that would really freak me out if I had a therapist who started crossing those lines. So Crystal Johnson goes on to explain in her story that she completely listened to her and trusted her and took what she said over what she thought. She really made her question her own inner voice. Leggett told Johnson that she owed her sobriety to her. And she said that she truly believed that she was going to drink if she didn't have her in her life. Like, her sobriety equals Leggett being in her life still. And Johnson felt dependent on Leggett to the point where she felt suicidal. She felt so constrained to this relationship that she felt so uncomfortable with that she genuinely wanted to die. When researching this story, they had a lot of different experts weigh in. One of the experts they talked to was Heather Hayes. She's a licensed therapist and nationally known interventionist, and she was asked her insights. She said that behavior like this is completely inappropriate. State ethics rules forbid therapists to perform these kind of relationships outside of treatment because they can exploit clients to get what they want. There is a power differential between the therapist and the client when you move in the realm of friendship and going on trips together, and then the boundaries get very blurred. In my opinion, there were no boundaries in the situation. This is where the therapist needs to stop practicing and get help themselves. And I could not agree with that thought more. So after a while, Johnson realized this isn't normal, this isn't okay, and I need to report something. So she reported it to MAR, and Leggett's bosses, thankfully, were in agreement that this was completely inappropriate, unprofessional, and she needed to be out of the field as quickly as possible. She was terminated from MAR, and then she was also reported to the Georgia Addiction Counselors Association in hopes that they will revoke her accreditation after they found her to violate major ethical codes and fail to ensure the safety and welfare of her clients. Unfortunately, she's still practicing in the state of Georgia. It's all legal. All of the complaints have been in, but they have not finished the investigation. And more than a year later, no further investigating has taken place. This has really upset a lot of people, especially Johnson. She wonders, does Georgia even care about the mental health and the people that she could be treating right now? And that is honestly a really big concern for a lot of people. All right, so now that we've talked about how unethical her practice was, let's dive into what ethics were broken in this situation. So the first one I found is section A6B, and it says extending counseling boundaries, counselors consider the risks and benefits of extending current relationships beyond conventional parameters. So some examples include, like it says, attending a formal client ceremony wedding, committing to going to different events, purchasing a service from a client. These are boundaries that should not be broken and should not even be stepped into. Something that I love that Dr. Johnson says, if it seems like it could be wrong, it is. So don't go there. In this situation, the client relationship went far out of the therapy realms, where they went and did things together and had inappropriate conversations. And that truly does violate this specific code of ethics. If it had been followed, there wouldn't have been any inappropriate interaction outside of therapy, and Johnson wouldn't have been put in uncomfortable and compromising situations. The next code that was violated is Section A6E, where it says non-professional interactions or relationships, other than sexual or romantic interactions or relationships, counselors avoid entering into non-professional relationships with former clients, their romantic partners, or their family members when the interaction is potentially harmful to the client. This applies to both in-person and electronic interactions or relationships. So this heavily applies to them doing things outside of therapy by going and doing races together, going out of the state on trips, and eventually even sleeping in the same bed together. That made Johnson incredibly uncomfortable, but she felt like she had to do it to maintain the relationship. And all of the text messages that they said and all of the profanities that the therapist used were completely inappropriate and was very harmful to Johnson, her client. The next code of ethics that was violated was B1B. Respect for privacy. Counselors respect the privacy of prospective and current clients. Counselors request private information from clients only when it is beneficial to the counseling process. Now, Leggett, specifically in one instance in therapy, asked Johnson to list out all of her past crushes and why she had a crush on them. As she went through the list and exposed all of this very personal information, she followed up with the question, why am I not on that list? Not only is that incredibly inappropriate, but she also asked a lot of personal information that was not beneficial to the therapeutic relationship or to the counseling, but it made Johnson feel very violated and very uncomfortable. Now, this next code of ethics that I'm going to go over, I think is my favorite because it truly does outline exactly what is expected of you as a therapist and a client, and there really is no question to what is expected. So it's section I1D, and it says knowledge counselors know and understand the ACA Code of Ethics and other applicable ethics codes from professional organizations or certification and licensure bodies of which they are members. Lack of knowledge or misunderstanding of an ethical responsibility is not a defense against a charge of unethical conduct. I love this one, and I feel like it's so important because a lot of times in life you try to get away with things of saying, well, I just didn't know. But this clearly states that that is not a defense against being charged being unethical. Because we are responsible as therapists to know these code of ethics, and not only to know them, but to live them thoroughly so that we can protect our clients and protect ourselves from malpractice. And if this had been at all observed, then none of the violations that Leggett had would even have happened. As counselors, we do have that legal obligation, and we need to follow it in its entirety. So now that we have read the story and all of the codes that were violated in this situation, what can be done in the future to prevent situations like this, to make it so clients never have that horrible experience? The first one I thought of was take supervision seriously in training. In the ACD Code of Ethics, section F1A, it says client welfare, a primary obligation of counseling supervisors, is to monitor the services provided by supervisees. Counseling supervisors monitor client welfare and supervisee performance and professional development. To fulfill these obligations, supervisors meet regularly with supervisees to review the supervisee's work and help them become prepared to serve a range of diverse clients. Supervisors have a responsibility to understand and follow the ACDA Code of Ethics. I think this is so important because especially in the beginning stages of our career as therapists, we need all the help that we can get to make sure that we are upholding our part and our code of ethics as much as we can. Having a supervisor with a lot of experience who can step in and go, actually, you can't do that, or I would do this instead to keep you safe. Those tips and those observations, they add up to make it so that you can be the most ethical therapist that you can be. And hopefully, if you had this kind of supervision, you would have never alluded to the kind of behavior that Leggett had towards Johnson. The next step of prevention that I thought of is to make sure that you have consistent check-ins. In the ACD Code of Ethics, section F6A, it says evaluation supervisors document and provide supervisees on ongoing feedback regarding their performance and schedule periodic formal evaluative sessions throughout the supervisory relationship. I think this is so incredibly important because a lot of people think that it's just in the beginning that you need the help and the reminders, but to have that accountability, to have someone come in and evaluate your work, see what you're doing, and to be able to check in on your behavior as a therapist is very important, because you can't get away with things if you're going to be continually checked in on. And I think that's important as a profession, especially in the therapy realm, when we have so many people, their personal stories and their mental health on the line, that we need to have a second party check in and make sure we're doing the best that we can. And last but not least, in the form of prevention, I think it is so important that action is taken when therapists are unable to ethically practice. Now, with the first two steps, you're able to have a second party come in and check on what you're doing. And when that happens and they're not performing up to protocol and what's correct, it's so important that action is taken. In ACD section F6B, it says gatekeeping and remediation through initial and ongoing evaluation. Supervisors are aware of supervising limitations that might impede performance. Supervisors assist supervisors in securing remedial assistance when needed. They recommend dismissal from training programs, applied counseling settings, and state or voluntary professional credentialing processes when those supervisees are unable to demonstrate that they can provide competent professional services to a range of diverse clients. That is so incredibly important, to be able to see that someone is not able to practice in an ethical manner, and to not only take action, but to make it so that they don't have influence on anyone else until they're up to protocol or seek the help that they personally need. I truly believe that these 3 different forms of prevention will help it so that stories like this don't happen to poor Crystal and have situations where they felt violated, and then in the future have that therapist still continually practicing because investigations don't happen. So hopefully with prevention, these situations just won't happen in the future. Here are my references, and thank you so much for listening to this presentation, and I hope you have a great day.